Hey guys, welcome back to another live stream. So today we're going to be having a look at economics, and initially what I'm going to try to do is finish up chapter 1, chapter 2, and then chapter 3. You guys can see it's quite a lot, but let's see what we can do. So this is basically the syllabus for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So it's quite recent, and then these are the following chapters. So in total in economics we have about 6 chapters. So today I'm going to be doing half of the entire syllabus in IGCSE. Now if you're going to be doing the multiple choice exam, then we've already learned about 15 questions from here if you do chapter 3. So we're going to start with the basic economic problem. Now, after this live stream ends, I will send all of these notes to the website where you can find all these notes and then revise at your own time. So we're going to start with the basic economic problem. That is the chapter 1, and whenever you start with economics, I think this is the first thing that you do. So we're going to start by defining economics, and then we'll move on to scarcity, which is a very important aspect in economics. So we're going to start with what is economics. Now you can't follow along, take your notebook, and also make some short notes, because this website where I'm getting all of these notes are very trustable, and you can trust this website to the max. Okay, so all of this is legit, and I think let's just begin. So we're going to start with defining what is economics, and this should be like one of the most easiest questions now. Rarely do you get this asked, but sometimes in the multiple choice questions you do get this asked. So economics, what is economics? Economics is a social science, okay, that describes, okay, the factors that determine the production, distribution, and consumptions of goods and services. So you can see the source is Wikipedia, okay. So the source is Wikipedia, and it's also the definition that you can use in IGCSE and get it correct. Now, initially, when we start with economics in chapter 1, we look at the resources, we look at why we need economics in our life, we look at the day-to-day examples, we look at the day-to-day uses, and we see why economics is very helpful. So we start up with what is resources, because throughout economics, resources is always mentioned. Every time we always mention what resources are, and therefore you need to know what resources are in economics. So resources are basically inputs that are needed for the production of goods and services. So later on we'll get to know why goods and services, how is economics related to all these inputs and everything. You'll get to know all of that soon. Okay, so you need to know that resources are simply inputs that are used in the production of goods and services. Now, again, if you have any question, you can put it in the chat. We'll try to answer that live if you're watching this live. And if you're not, then again, you can comment down below and I'll try to respond as quick as possible. So resources are basically inputs, and we know that, and we'll come across resources throughout the entire economics syllabus. Okay, we'll move on to scarcity. Scarcity is a lack of something, and just from its definition, even if you search on Google what scarcity is, you'll just simply get a lack of something. Okay, and in this context, in economics, we're saying a lack of resources. Now, let me quickly explain about scarcity. Okay, so first of all, in this world we have limited needs and wants. Okay, for example, let me just give you some examples. For example, the land. Okay, the land we're currently building, these buildings, these houses, these supermarkets, these hospitals, these shops, all of the land, or all of the places where something has been built on, is limited. Okay, now you can think about this way. Okay, so for how long will everything last? Okay, for example, you have a hospital next to your house. That land is taken. Okay, nothing else can be built over it. Okay, maybe next to your house you have a supermarket. Nothing can be built next to that. So all of the land around your house is taken, and the only way you can get more land is to get to another place. Now, in this world, we don't have infinite places, and that's where we come to economics. Okay, and economics helps us, you know, wisely locate all of our natural resources. So land being one of a very good example, and also a factor of production that we will come across in this chapter later on, which is a very, very important topic too, and is one of the most basic topics. Okay, then we move on to the economic goods. So basically, scarcity, let me just repeat that. We'll also look at the economic problem. All of this is economic problem. So when you want to define what is an economic problem, you have to mention scarcity, you have to mention resources, you have to mention economic and free goods. Now, it's not a must to mention economic and free goods, but it's least resources and scarcity. Scarcity, especially, must be defined. Now, we have something called economic agents, and these are the people that decide the allocations of resources. These are the people that decide, okay, yes, you can build on this. Yes, you can, do this or a certain thing. So these are called economic agents. We'll come across that also, like economic agents, for example, the government or private firms. So those are all called economic agents. Let's move on to economic goods. Okay, so we have two types of goods, and I will define what a good is. So what a good is simply something that could be touched, okay? Tangible items. So we have goods and services. We all know that differentiation. Goods, simply you can touch them, and services, you can't touch them. So let's give an example of each. Goods, okay? A good can be, for example, a desk, okay, where you study the desk. It's a good, okay? Why is it a good? How can I classify it's a good? A good is made from scarce resources, okay? Those are actually called economic goods. Okay, so economic goods are basically those goods that are made by scarce resources, as basically means that this is something that is limited. Okay, wood example is a good example for something that's limited. Okay, in the long run, of course, you can plant trees and get, but in economics, we look at what we have. We'll have to wait for 100 years for that tree to grow and then cut it down. Now, humans cannot wait for 100 years just to, make something. And therefore, we have to look at what we currently have. And that's why economics looks at what we have right now in the present day and not what we will get in 100 years, because in 100 years, we might even have nothing. Okay, so economics looks at what is available in the present day. Okay, and economic goods are simply those goods that are scarce in supply, meaning when you give them out, they're scarce. You can't make like unlimited, paper or something like that. Okay, unlimited phones. You can't make that because the resources to make that product is scarce. Okay, you don't have enough because there will be at one time, okay, where there won't be enough. For example, you can have minerals, okay, like gold. Do you think gold will be everlasting? No, you can only discover them, and we later on get to know that discovery of resources actually impacts the industry and economics. So we look at all of that in this live stream. This live stream is going to be very, very long, so I'm going to try to speed up the easy stuff. Okay, so we move on to free goods. So I hopefully you understood the economic goods. We move on to the free goods. Okay, now free goods are those that are abundant in supply. Okay, that means that they are unlimited. Okay, now you might tell me, okay, what is unlimited? Okay, these are stuff we call renewable. Okay, so if you do biology, you should know this. We have renewable, we have non-renewable. So renewable is simply something like sunlight. Okay, sunlight will never finish. Okay, it's a process of the earth and will never finish. Wind will never finish. Wind power that we generate is a free good. Okay, then stuff like air, we breathe air, we don't pay for the air is not limited, we have enough air, we have enough oxygen. They are unlimited in supply. Okay, so hopefully you understood that. Hopefully you understood the distinguish between a resource, economic good, and free good. And now we move on to the factors of production. A very common question also in the theory paper and also sometimes in the multiple choice question. So this initially, if you are in school and you learn economics, this is moreover the first topic you learn, I believe, and then you come on to the economic goods, the free goods, but depending on the teacher. But I will move according to the syllabus. So the syllabus first says, okay, factors of production, then we do the factors of production. Now, resources are called the factors of production. From its name, you can see production. Production basically means to make, okay? And these are the factors that affect that making, okay? If I want to make paper, what are those factors that affect? Okay, So that's what we say factors of production, okay? And for example, a factor of production is land. So we're going to start with land. And to remember the factors of production, I say cell, okay? S-E-L-L. Sorry, C-E-L-L. Capital, enterprise, land, and labor, okay? So this is a good word to remember all the factors of production. So I think they're called acronyms, if I'm not wrong. So CELL, that's how you remember them. So that's that. So let's start with land. So all resources in the economy, okay, all of them in the economy, which includes the on the surface, under the surface, like lakes, rivers, forests, all of that, anything that is on the earth is called land. So that's what we classify it as land, okay? And these things that are on the earth are limited, okay? They are a factor of production because they're limited, okay? Because previously I gave you an example of land, like the buildings. This is where it comes into the factors of production. Okay, we move on to the reward for land, and the reward for land is rent is received. So basically, what this means is that okay, if I make a building, okay, and I'm getting rent from it, how am I earning from that production? I'm getting rent. Okay, so everything in these four factors of production, you're receiving something. It's an income. Okay. Next up, we look at the amount of land in existence. Okay, so when we're looking at the factors of production, number one, we're going to look at the definition, we're going to look at the reward, we're going to look at the quality, we're going to look at the quantity, we're going to look at the mobility. Okay, so we're going to look at those five factors in all of the factors of production, and it's a must you know all those five factors because they can ask any, like in some MCQ questions they will ask you what is the reward for land, what is the reward for labor, or how is the quantity affected in land, okay, how is the quality affected in land. Okay, so when we look at the quantity, okay, when we look at the supply, it has to be fixed. Okay, you cannot get more land, you cannot produce land. Okay, you can only expand land, you can only buy to other places, you cannot buy the you cannot make the land. Okay, you cannot produce in a factory land. Okay, you can't make space. Okay, so the only way you can get this land is to buy, and that in different areas, not in the same area. Okay, so we say that supply in land is fixed. Okay, we move on to the quality of land, and quality depends on the soil type. So we look at the soil type, the fertility, and weather. So if you have learned geography, you should know the factors that affect land and, like, you know, in farming and all of that. So it's typically the same: soil type, fertility, weather, and those more like geographically factors, geography factors. Okay, we move on to the mobility. Okay, what is mobility? Mobility is simply the ease of the use. Okay, the ease of changing the use. Okay, that's what we call mobility. Okay, so mobility is the ease of changing the use and the location. Okay, so mobility is the ease. Okay, that's the main word there, the ease of changing its use or location. So for land, can I change its location? Okay, think about it. Can I change the location? No, I can't change the location. I cannot take, you know, this land and take it to somewhere else. You know, Africa will always be Africa. America will always be America. Okay, so I cannot take Africa all the way to South America, for example, or North America. I cannot take Antarctica to Africa. Okay, so this land can only be at one place. But when we look at the use, okay, we can change it. Okay, I can destruct the building and make a hospital. From the hospital, I can make it an office building. From the office building, I can make a supermarket. I'm changing its use. Okay, and when we're changing only the use, we're saying occupationally mobile. Okay, so we have geographically and we have occupationally. So number one, land cannot move from different places, so we say it's geographically immobile. But you can change its use, so it's occupationally mobile. Hopefully you understood that. Let's move on to labor. Okay, labor is basically the human resources available in the economy. Okay, this is the mental efforts and the physical efforts of workers. Okay, the key word here is workers. Okay, later on we'll get to know by capital where machineries come into the image, but for now we're looking at workers. Okay, this is the mental and physical effort of the worker. And we start by the reward because that's the most important and most asked question. And we say that the reward for this is wages slash salaries. For example, if I go as to be a doctor, okay, and my reward from being a doctor is getting a salary, getting money. That's my source of income. Okay, and the supply of labor now is not like land, but it actually affects. So the first thing you need to know with the supply of labor is the numbers of workers available at the current time and the number of hours a worker will work. Okay, so let's go each factor by factor. So we're going to start with the number of workers that are available in my country, for example, or in the population, or in so number one factor, the population size. Okay, if I have a big population size, what's going to happen? I'll have more workers, right? If I have a big population, there'll be more workers willing to work. Okay, that means my labor will increase. I'll have more labor. Okay, next of all is the number of years of schooling. Okay, now some countries you finish school at year 12. Some countries you finish school in year 13. Some countries, even after that, like you can't work after university. So there are many different types of requirements in different countries. So if you have a smaller or lower school living age, that means that you can work quicker. Like as soon as my schools are over, everyone looks for jobs. And that means the labor will increase. So if my school living age is shorter, then that means that more people are available for work. We move on to the retirement age. Okay, now retirement age is very important because some countries they even retire at 60. Some countries they retire at 70, 80. Okay, it all depends on the retirement age. If one country has a retirement age of about 80 years, for example, okay, I'm not saying that's true, but 80 years, for example, what that's going to mean is that people are going to work for almost like 60 years, okay, 20 years, maybe they leave from school, 60 years of constant labor, okay, that means that there will be more labor and the supply will be more, okay, the more the workers, the more the supply, okay, you need to understand that. Okay, now I'll be right back and we're gonna have a small tiny break, so I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, sorry about that, but we are back. Okay, so where was I? I was looking at the labor, okay, and I was looking particularly at the supply of labor, and I was looking at the factors that affect the number of workers. And the first one I talked about was population size and the number of schools, and then I talked about retirement age, and then finally now I'm going to age structure. Okay, if there are a young population, that means that there are more youth, and that means there will be more workers. Okay, and we move on to the attitude towards the working women. Now, some countries they say that women should not work. Okay, and it's true and it still happens, but now over time it is changing. But some countries say that women should not work, and if what that means is that there's going to be less labor. So if there's more labor, okay, if someone accepts the women into the population, into the labor force, we say, then there will be more labor. The next factor is the number of hours they work. Okay, in some countries they work for 12 hours, some countries 6 hours, some 8, some 9. So the longer they work, the more the labor. Next up is the if you're doing part-time or full-time. Okay, so if I'm doing part-time, there will be less labor. If I'm doing full-time, there will be more labor. And then some countries, it is a must to give them holidays. Okay, maybe if you have more public holidays, then it's gonna reduce the labor. Then we have the maternity, paternity leaves, that is biological factors, and no one can stop that. But okay, it can change from country to country with the maternity leaves. Some countries don't tolerate maybe only when you're like 8 months pregnant, 6 months pregnant. That's when you can have leave. But it depends again from day to day, from time to time. Okay, so it changes as new regulations are made. And then finally, length of sick leave. So if I'm sick, okay, like right now, COVID, maybe I say I'm sick. The max they can give me maybe is like 2 weeks. Some countries will give 1 week. Some will give 3 weeks. Some will give 1 month. Okay, so labor is affected in all sorts of ways like that. Then we move on to the quality of labor, and quality of labor will depend on the skills, the educations, and the qualification of labor. Then we move on to labor mobility, and labor mobility can depend on various factors. Okay, labor can achieve high occupationally mobile. That simply means that you can change the use, and they can also, if they have the right skills and qualifications, like from a doctor, I can become an engineer if I have the skills. Okay, and that is that. Okay, but you cannot change it geographically. Hopefully, you understand that. Okay, so we move on. Okay, sorry, it is geographically mobile because you can change countries and then work there. So it is geographically mobile in a sort of way. We then move on to capital. Okay, capital. These are basically man-made resources, like machines, and they help us in the factors of production. The reward for capital is called interest. The supply of capital is depending on the demand. If I want one sort of product, it is because of capital. Maybe I want some more crepes. Okay, the machine will also help me, to make more of that. We move on to the quality. Quality depends on the product you buy. Okay, if my machine is high end, very expensive, very good, making nice quality cars, then of course it is depending on the goods you use to make the product. And then when looking at the mobility, it is geographically immobile. You cannot change uh, maybe a big machinery from place to place, like an office building. You cannot change it to another location. And on the other hand, it can be occupationally mobile. You can change its use. Okay, you can change a machine's use, like from a delivery van, you can make it to an office van for something else. Finally, we move on to enterprise. And enterprise is basically the ability to take risks and run a business venture of a firm, which is called enterprise. Okay, and basically ensures that the people who start a business, entrepreneurs, organize all the factors of production, and they take risks, decisions, and necessary to make the firms run successfully. The reward for enterprise is generated from the business. So this is profit. We're looking at the supply of enterprise. It's dependent and is depending on the skills. If you have very good skills, then like innovation, communication, risk taking, then the supply will be more. And we're looking at the quality. Again, it depends on how you satisfy the demand in the economy with your innovative ways or your good thinking. And enterprise is both geographically and occupationally mobile. Okay, I can change my business from one place to another, and at the same time, I can change its use, so it's both. So, the four factors of production, we are done, and I took a lot of time just explaining the four factors of production because they're very important in economics. And now let's move on to the opportunity cost. Okay, so the after talking about the full factors of production, the next thing you need to have a look at is opportunity cost. Okay, opportunity cost simply, okay, what it means is that the scarcity of resources, when they're not efficient, okay, that's when opportunity cost comes in. Okay? When you need to make a decision is when opportunity cost comes into the picture. Okay, now opportunity cost. What is the definition of opportunity cost? Opportunity cost is the next best alternative that is sacrificed or foregone in order to satisfy the other. Okay, that's the best definition I can give to you. Okay, so if you make another decision, that thing that you've foregone is the opportunity cost. Okay, not the one that you decided, the one that you've foregone. That's what the opportunity cost is. Okay, we move on to some examples on how like firms take. Now, I won't take a lot of time on this because again, it's more straightforward. Like a government, if they want to make a public school or a public garden, they'd say, okay, we need education. So that means that, we're going to take priority to the education. So the good that's foregone is the public garden. Okay, so same to a business. Should you decide to make crisps or soda, if I decide to make soda, then crisps will be my opportunity cost. Okay, now we move on to the production possibility curve, and this is basically the maximum combination of two goods that can be produced by the economy with all the available resources. If you don't have resources, you can't produce anything. So with only the available resources can you produce a certain number of goods. So this is how a PPC curve looks, the production possibility curve, and you can see whenever it's inside the curve means that producing all of the goods. When it's outside, we say it is to be inefficient because it's producing less than what it can potentially do. And when it's in W, we say that it is unattainable. So W unattainable, Z inefficient, unattainable because it is beyond the scope of the economy's existing resources. Now we need to look at factors that affect the curve to shift outwards and inwards. Okay, so to shift outwards, to move more this side. Okay, the factors would be discover or develop new raw materials. Okay, discover new raw materials. When we're going sorry, we're still going to do outwards. So when we're going outwards, discover new raw materials, increase the technology, increase the labor force. Labor force is getting more labor. Then we look at the inward shift. When we're looking at the inward shift, okay, when we're looking at inward shift, we're basically saying natural disasters which remove the resources, running out of resources or depletion of resources, low investment in new technologies will lead to the inward shift. And finally, we have a look at how is the opportunity cost linked to PPC. Now, we use the PPC curve to decide, okay, if I move from good X, if I go down, what's going to happen. Okay, if I produce 1,500 units, what's going to happen. So that's why we use the PPC curve to compare two goods, and then we decide which one's the best. Okay, so let's move on to the next chapter. So we're done with the first chapter, and now we're going to move on to the allocation of resources. So economics is all about this, so basic economic problems, and then all of this. Now this one right here is a big topic. Okay, this topic covers demand, supply, and everything related to that. What is an economy? Okay, now an economy is an area where people and firms trade and consume goods. Okay, so an economy is simply where the people and the firms produce, trade, and consume goods and services, and can vary from size to size. Okay, and this can vary from your local town to your country or the globe itself. So we start with microeconomics and then we move on to the macroeconomics. This is also quite important to understand between micro and macro, because they can also ask you the uses of what is the microeconomics, the uses of microeconomics, uses of macroeconomics. So it's quite important to do that. So let's start with the microeconomics, okay? So we're going to start with the microeconomics, and this is the study of individual markets. So the main sort of idea right here is individual markets, okay? So this is the study of individual markets, okay? So microeconomics is the study of individual markets, for example, studying the effect of a price change on a demand of a good, okay? This is individual markets. What do we mean by individual markets, right? For example, Apple, okay? Apple will analyze their products. Okay, the iPhone 12 is selling good. Okay, that means that what are they gonna do? Produce more iPhone 12s or get a better series of iPhone 12. This is all related to the individual markets. No one is interfering with how they're analyzing anything. Okay, and then we move on to macroeconomics, and macroeconomics is the study of the entire economy. Okay, the whole economy as a whole. Okay, and who does this? The government. Okay, the government is the person in charge. The government, or it's not a person, but it's a whole, like, a whole group of people that decide on the economy. Okay, so we have microeconomics, that is the individual market, and we have macroeconomics, that is basically the whole entire economy. We move on to the roles of markets in allocation of resources. Okay, now here is where we come to the economic agents that I was previously mentioning, okay, when we looked at the scarcity sort of topic. Now, resource allocation. What is resource allocation? It's simply when economies decide what goods and services to provide and how to produce them and to who to produce them for. These are called economic agents. They basically practice the economic agents. They practice resource allocation. So these economic agents will see, okay, who are buying, what particular percentage of this population is buying this good. Okay, where should I give it to the villages? Maybe they don't have enough water. Okay, so that's what we do. That's how we can um, show the how goods and services are provided. Okay, then we move on to um, the questions that these economic agents tell themselves. Okay, so these economic agents tell themselves that, okay, we first of all need to know what should I produce. Okay, what should I produce would include something like what good can I produce. Okay, for example, should I produce food, for example, like bread, or should I produce water? Okay, these economic agents will look, okay, do we need more water or do we need more bread? Okay, so these economic agents analyze and then they look at how to analyze or how to allocate these resources. Okay, so with the roles of the market, the economic agents, what to produce, they keep these questions in mind: what to produce, how to produce, so which type of active production should we use, and for whom to produce. Okay, who should get this service the most? Okay, maybe this village doesn't have enough water, so they should get the product. And this we call is the basic economic questions that every economic agent must encounter, must think to themselves in a basic way. They need to look at what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Let's move on to market. Okay, and market is simply an arrangement that brings all the producers together and the consumers of a good or service. So initially what this means is that they engage in exchange. Okay. Okay. So why exchange? Okay. So for example, I have made a good and I have money. I will trade my money with the good, and that's what we call exchange. And now, I'm sure you've heard of the barter trade, and that's where the system of money came in. We'll also talk about money in chapter 3, actually. We look at how money is allocated, we look at borrowing factors, we look at everything related to that. So, sorry about that. But we're back. Okay, so simply that's what a market is, and that's what we look at. Okay, so it's simply how we exchange goods and services, and then how the market works. So the market is simply the producers, consumers working together, and they exchange. Okay, so let's move on. And right here, what it's saying is that goods and services are bought and sold in the market at an equilibrium price, where demand and supply are equal. Okay, and this is called the price mechanism. So what is the price mechanism? Price mechanism is simply when the demand and supply are equal. Okay, and this basically, the price mechanism, helps us answer the three basic economic questions. Producers will produce the good that consumers will demand the most. Then we move on. Okay, we move on. We move on to demand. Now, demand, very, very popular topic. Okay, demand. What is demand from its name? Okay, demand is simply what you want. Okay, even in English, like when they say, "I demand for this," it means that I want this. Okay, I am willing to do whatever for that thing. Okay, I demand you sit down. Okay, for example, that's a bit like more harsh, but I demand. That means that I want you to, and I'm willing to do anything to do that. Now that's kind of like the English way, and I'm gonna compare that with economics. Okay, so economics demand is simply the want and the willingness of a consumer to buy a good or service at any given price. Okay, so if I have enough money, if I have 30 million, or sorry, that's a bit too much. If I have $1 million, okay, and I demand to buy a palace, if I have have enough money, and I am willing, and I have that ability, okay. Sometimes they say demand is the ability, okay. So it is the ability also to buy at a given price over a given period of time. Because okay, I want to demand anything, but I don't have the ability to do that. Okay, so with demand, you need to also look at that in perspective of ability. Because if you don't have the ability to do that, then I mean you can't do anything. Okay, so demand is the want and the willingness of consumers to buy a good or service at a given price. Okay, so that's the definition. You can write that down if you're watching this live, and if not, that's a really good definition of demand. And then we come to what is effective demand, and this is where basically where the willingness to buy is backed up by the ability to pay. Okay, there you go. That's called effective demand. Effective demand. Okay, maybe I have demand. Okay, but I don't have effective demand. Maybe okay, I want to buy a palace, but I do. Do I have the ability to buy that palace? Maybe not. Okay, when you don't have money, we say that is effective demand. Um, but you maybe want it. Okay, so that's more of a want, but not the ability. So we call that effective demand. We move on. When you have effective demand for a good or service, we say that's quantity demanded. Okay, so for example, I have effective demand on a palace. Okay, that will basically mean that that palace will be a quantity demanded. So hopefully you are understanding what demand means, and it's quite simple example in economics. It's a very popular topic to be talked about, and at the same time, uh, some students don't even understand what demand is, and demand, even the definition, just comes from its name. Okay, demand is like an English word, and unlike biological terms, that's why I don't really like biology. You just need to know that one, but with economics you have to reason. Okay, that's the only way you can get out of it. So individual demand. What is individual demand? This is demand from one consumer, while market demand for a product is the total aggregate and demand for the product. Okay, so we have individual demand. This is when one person demands for something, or maybe one demand from one consumer. And when we say market demand, it's when the total country, total nation, or the percentage, or the, you can say, how much percent of the population are willing to buy this. Okay, for example, yeah, so it's the sum of all the individual demands together, which gives us the market demand. So it's also important to know that. So we have talked about effective demand, we've talked about uh, the market demand, and we've talked about the individual demand, and then also we've talked about quantity demanded, and we gave the definition of demand. So we've done a lot, and now we come to the law of demand, and the law of demand is very easy, and this states that an increase in the price will lead to a decrease in demand, and a decrease in price will lead to a decrease in demand. And of course that applies for the reverse. I just said the reverse, but okay, if you know an increase in price leads to a decrease in demand, then vice versa. Okay, ceteris paribus. Let me use my complex English words. Okay, so we will have a break at 1 hour. So if you're watching this live, I'll give you a break because effective learning, you can't just do that for 8 hours, okay, or something like that, because this topic is very long. So let's see how long it's going to take us to finish it. So let's move on to the diagrams, and here you can see we have the price, we have the quantity demanded. Okay, so you can see the price, quantity demanded, and this is maybe a demand curve for Coca-Cola. Okay, and when there's a decrease in price, what's happening? Decrease in price, increase in quantity. You can see if I decrease the price from A to B, that means that I'm increasing the quantity demanded. So the demand curve will always run from the top to the bottom, and the supply curve, later we'll get to know, will always run from the okay, both of them run from the top to bottom, but this one runs from the left to right, and that one from the right to left. Okay, now let's look at something called extension and contraction. Okay, now an extension is simply when there is an increase in demand because of the prices. So when there's increased demand, we say extension. When there's a decrease in demand, we see contraction. Okay, so it's quite simple. Then we look at shifts to the left and shift to the right. Now this is a big topic, as you guys can see. There's a lot to discuss about this. Okay, so we move on to shift to the right and then shift to the left. So shift to the right, you can tell, is from A to B, so to the right. Okay, why would something shift to the right? Now, a rise in demand for a product due to the changes in other factors. Due to the changes in other factors. Have you heard that right? Due to the changes in other factors. Okay, uh, excluding price, causes the demand curve to shift to the right. So when the demand rises because of the factors, okay, because of the other factors excluding price, okay, so without price, no price, okay, then we say shift to the right. Okay, we don't say price because it's part of the curve, it's part of the y-axis, so we don't count it that way. Okay, and but price is a factor. We'll later get on to that. And then shift to the left is the opposite. Fall in demand because of factors, excluding the price. That will lead to a shift to the left. Okay, now let's move on to the causes of a shift in a demand curve. Why would something shift to the right? Why would something shift to the left? Okay, so we start consumer's income. Okay, this is my personal income, and if I get more money, what will that result to? You know, me having the ability to buy more products, me having the ability to demand more, and me having the ability to demand more will result to more demand. Okay, which will result to a shift in right. Okay, so it's like a sort of chain. I've had income, I've increased my income. The increase in income will lead me to having the ability to demand. That will have me ability to get more demand, and that will increase my demand, and therefore that will shift to the right. Next up, it also applies for the opposite. So if I have a reduction in my income, maybe due to tax. Okay, yeah, it's coming up down here. So right here, tax. So that's consumer incomes, and then we move on to tax incomes. So tax incomes basically means that a rise in tax on incomes means a less demand. Okay, so if I have more tax, that means that will be less demand, right? And the same for the others. So if I have low tax, then I'll have more income to use. So therefore more demand, therefore shift to the right. We then move on to the price of substitutes. Substitutes are basically goods that can be used instead of a particular good. They can be called alternatives. So for example, an example is coffee and tea. Now, of course, some people will hate me saying this, but coffee and tea are similar. So if maybe coffee, the price increases, then just go to the tea, okay? And that affects a rise in the price of one of their substitutes will lead to a rise in the product for the other one, okay? And that will shift to the right. So if coffee's price increases, I'll shift to the other good because it's cheaper. It's a human nature to want the cheaper one, right? Cheaper but good. I'm not saying that if coffee rises, tea is bad. I like tea, so why spend more money? I just go for the tea. Then we move on to price complements, so complementary goods. So we say these are complementary goods. Complementary goods are stuff that go along with one of the goods. For example, a printer and an ink, or petrol and fuel, petrol in a car, fuel in a car, and so on and so forth. Okay, so a rise in the price of one of the complementary good will reduce the demand for the particular product. Okay, so this will shift to the left. Okay, so for example, there's a rise in the price of the printer. This will reduce the demand for the other product. Okay, because it's too expensive. Maybe if I want to buy a car, but it's too expensive. What will that mean? I will not buy the car. And if I don't have a car, why would I want fuel? So the fuel will also go down. Okay. Also, when people don't buy a car when the fuel rates are very high, so it's all like because of complementary goods. Then we move on, change in consumers' taste. Okay, so for example, there was one time fidget spinners was a big deal. When there were fidget spinners, if everyone was just having fidget spinners. or maybe like those Pokemon cards that are currently, like, we've seen those videos, right? The Pokemon cards now are a big value. And when there's a new fashion or when there's a new taste, okay, the product that will is their current that is very fashionable will increase its demand, okay, which will shift to the right. So remember, increase in demand, shift to the right, decrease in demand, shift to the left. Okay, then we move on to the degree of advertising. Now, the reason of advertising is like, for example, you go to YouTube, the ads, you always see the same ads again and again. Is that true? Like, you always see them again and again, or like ads that say, play this game, play this game, play this game. And eventually, at one point, we'll be like, okay, let's just give it a try. And once when you give it a try, then you get addicted to that game, and they have made a profit. So because of that advertising, that particular product will then shoot up and the demand will increase, and that will lead to a shift to the right. But when you have low advertising, no one knows about your product, there will be no demand for that product, will then shift to the left. Okay. So hopefully you understand all of this. Okay. And so that is all the factors that affect the following. So that's all the factors that affect demand. Then we move on to supply. Okay, so demand and supply are like together, and you can see how long this chapter is. Then we have market price changes. We then have elasticity of demand. We have a lot. So it's going to be a long live stream, guys. So it's going to be then price elastic supply. We're going to look at the market economic systems, advantages, disadvantages. Okay, and then finally we'll move on to the next chapter. And some chapters are really short, so don't be scared. We'll get there. Okay. uh, this is actually the best video to watch for last minute revision, uh, at least for the 3 chapters. Okay, it's because I'm literally brushing up everything related to economics in these 3 chapters. So after this live stream, you have learned a lot, I hope. You'll be able to answer like 50% of the paper, because there's 6 chapters, we have learned 3 chapters. So if you do the math, 50%. Okay. And again, we'll take a break at 1 hour so you don't get tired. So in about like 8 minutes, we will take we will take a break. Okay, let's move on to the we'll have a 5 minute break if you were wondering. Again, because I've been talking for like 1 hour, and at the same time you've been listening for 1 hour, so I understand that. So we'll have a small break, and then we'll move on to the rest. Okay, so let's introduce supply. Okay, because demand and supply go together. We'll come across like you'll have the demand curve and the supply curve, okay, together. So we move on to supply. Supply is the want and willingness, just like demand, but this time of producers to supply a good or service at a given price. For demand, it was of a consumer to buy, not to supply, to buy a goods or service at a given price. But in this case, it is for the producers to supply a good or service at a given price. Okay, so hopefully you understand that. And then we look at the amount of goods and services producers are willing to make and supply is called quantity supplied. Okay, what is this called? It's called quantity supplied. So the amount I'm making is called the quantity supplied. Okay, for the other one, it was quantity demanded. For how much I'm demanding, it's called quantity demanded. So hopefully you understand that. I really hope you understand that. If there's any questions, put in the live chat, and if you're watching this as a normal video, then you can put it up in the comments. Okay. So the law of supply. What is the law of supply? The law of supply states that an increase in a price, when the price increases, this will lead to an increase in supply. Okay, so the other one, you were saying that an increase in price will lead to a decrease in demand, right? And this one says that an increase in price will lead to an increase in supply. Now, let me teach you why this happens. Okay, let's give an examples, because economics makes most sense when I give examples. I have a car, okay, and that car, for example, the Bugatti, that car is increasing in price. Okay, and as a producer, what do you want? Money. You want profit. Okay, you want the maximum money to do with the lowest production to time, for example. Okay, my machines will make that car and I'm getting a lot of money for that. The first thing that will come to me, make that car, because first of all I'm getting a lot of the price and I can maybe make that product in a very short time. All that mean that I am simply um, increasing the supply. Okay, I'm increasing the supply because the uh, because of the increase in the price. Okay, because of the increase in the price, I'm increasing the supply. And this will also work for the other way around. If there's a decrease in the price, why should I even make it? If I'm getting a very low return of the product, why should I even produce it? I should focus on the big products. So hopefully you understand that, okay? And it's quite important. Let's move on to the curve. So you can see from this curve, it's right to left. The demand curve is from left to right. So it's quite important to know that, because in the exam, if you switch them up, you're gonna get them wrong, okay? And this one says that if I go up, if I increase the price, quantity supplied will also increase, okay? So yeah, and this also applies for the extension and contraction. When there's an increase in supply, there will be um, when there's an increase in supply, we say it's an extension, and when there's a decrease in supply, we say it's a contraction. Okay, so increase in supply, extension, decrease in supply, contraction. Okay, we move on. A rise in the supply for a product due to the factors. So the rise in a supply of a product due to the factors excluding the price will cause the shift to the right. So it's similar to the demand definition for the shift. So it's a very similar uh, concept, except this one is supply instead of demand, right? Now let's have a look at the factors that affect, um, supply. Let's start with changes in the cost of production. Okay, so it's a quite important sort of topic. So when my cost of production is cheap, okay, when it's very cheap, when I can make this car at a very cheap price, that means I'll have more profit, or maybe the government has given me a subsidy. A subsidy is basically a fund that is given so that it can reduce the production cost, okay, and can promote that. So for example, books, okay, books industry, maybe the government says, okay, take this amount of money to produce more goods because we want to promote that. Okay, that will mean that this government is given a subsidy, so that will reduce the production and therefore you would make more supply. Okay, you'd supply it more. The next one is changing in the quantity of resources available. When there's more resources, that means I can easily make the product, but because now we know that if we have limited stuff, limited edition, it's more expensive, so therefore that will reduce the supply. Then we move on to technical changes. If there's better technology at a cheaper price, then we can make more stuff, more products at a cheaper price, and that will give us more income. Okay, and then we move on to profitability of other products. If one certain product is seen to be more profitable than the current one that is being produced, then they will shift it. Okay, so for example, I'm making crisps and then soda. Okay, and now I'm producing only soda, and you can see crisps are at the same production like price, and I'm getting more income. I'll shift to crisps. Okay, so depending on the profitability of other products, I will change my production, so the supply of the initial product will reduce, and that will cause a shift to the left, but the new product that I shift to will increase, so that will of course increase the thing. And we have other factors like weather, natural disasters, wars, that can all shift to the left. Okay, so those are the factors affecting supply. So you can see they are quite little, they're only about five, but four main. You can see the ones that are on bold. So we looked at all the curves, we looked at the production, we looked at the what do you call it, the extension and the contraction for both demand and supply. So next up, we'll look at a market price after the small sort of break that I'm gonna give you guys of let's say about 10 minutes or maybe 5 minutes. So we'll see. Maybe about 5 minutes. I'm gonna give a break of 5 minutes so you can freshen up, and then we we can start the live stream once again talking about market price, and then we'll look at the price changes and the elasticity. Elasticity is really important also. We'll look at elasticity of demand, elasticity of supply, and so on and so forth. So the next thing we're going to look at is equilibrium, disequilibrium, and everything related to market price. I'm going to explain everything in just a second after this break, after this 5 minutes. So I will see you after 5 minutes. Okay, so see you after 5 minutes. Okay, so hopefully you've had your break, and we're going to start to continue now. Hopefully you had a sip of water and you're ready to begin again. Okay, so market price. Let's start with that. Let's just have a recap of what we just talked about. So we talked about demand, we talked about supply, and now we're going to have a look at the market price. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Okay, so with market price, what we're mainly looking at is the market equilibrium price. Okay, what is this and what is this equilibrium price? Okay, so that's what we're going to be mainly focusing on. Okay, so that's what we're going to be having a look at. So the equilibrium price. Okay, so the equilibrium price is the price at which the demand and the supply curves they meet. Okay, so this is my demand curve. Remember, it shifts. It's from the left to right, and this is my supply curve. So this is my supply curve, and the supply curve is from right to left. Okay, going downwards. Both of them go downwards. If you want to see it like this. Okay. Now, equilibrium price is this point where they meet. Okay, where they meet is what we call the equilibrium price. Okay, this is when the demand is equal to the supply. That's what we call equilibrium price. The disequilibrium price is when the demand and the supply curves do not meet. Okay, maybe when demand is more or when supply is less. Basically, they don't meet at a given point. Okay, and that's what we call disequilibrium. Okay, so this is when the demand curve doesn't meet the supply curve in simple terms. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about the price changes. Okay, when I do this, what happens to the equilibrium price? Okay, so in this diagram, two disequilibrium prices are marked 2.5 and 1.5. So 2.5 right here, sorry, 2.5 and 1.5, right? 2.5 and 1.5. Okay, for example, this is 2.5, this, and then this is 1.5. At this point, no, they're not meeting. The only point they meet is in the center right here. Is that right? And at 2.5, the demand is 4, while the supply is 10. Okay, 2.5, what happened? 4 and 10. Okay, 4 at 2.5 and 1.5, it's 10. There is excess supply relative to demand. Okay, so there, when I'm producing this and then I'm producing this. Okay, with the supply, you can see it's increasing by 10 when I'm producing 2.5, but with 1.5 I'm only producing 4. Okay, so when the price is above the equilibrium price, when the price is above the equilibrium price, a surplus is experienced. When this 2.5 is above this equilibrium price right here, when it is above the equilibrium sort of line, when the two are together, whatever is above it, okay, we say that it is a surplus. Okay, it's a surplus. Surplus, even in English, means that is an increase. So I don't know if I can show you guys, but I don't know if you guys are able to see this. Are you guys able to see this? I think you should be, or not. Yeah, okay, whatever. So you can see a surplus describes the amount an asset or resource exceeds the portion. Okay, and you can see some diagrams right here. I'm not sure. Can you guys see? Well, no, let me just move my camera to that side. So I think you guys are able to see right now. So we have the surplus, which basically describes the amount of an asset or resource that exceeds the portion that's actively used. Okay, so you can see so many diagrams here. It's above. Okay, so it's above. So let's just keep that back to the center. So let's just move that back to the center. So that is what we call a surplus. And again, in English, we have shortage. Okay, and a shortage then would be when it's below the equilibrium price. Okay, so that's quite simple. Okay, and let's now move on to the price elasticity of demand. In simple terms, it's called the PED. Okay, the PED of a product simply is the responsiveness of the quantity demanded to the change in price. When I change the price, what is that response I'm getting? Okay, when I change the price of Coca-Cola, what is that return I'm getting? What is that responsiveness I'm getting? Okay, that's what we call the price elasticity of demand. Okay, now we have a formula here where it shows the change in quantity demanded over the change in price is how we calculated or how we calculate the PED. Okay. For example, calculate the price elasticity of demand of Coca-Cola from the diagram. Okay, so what you look at is, okay, from 500 to 300, and remember to calculate change, you'll do new price minus original price over the original price. So my new price is 500, for example, so 500 minus the old price, so the original price over 300 over 300. Now you take your calculator, fit this, and do times 100. Okay, uh, if you do that times 100, you would get your sort of answer, and then after that you do the quantity over the price. So hopefully everything is making sense now. And yeah, so a change in price which makes a higher change in quantity demanded. These products have a price elastic demand. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at elasticity. Okay, so elasticity of the curve. Okay, so that's where we're looking at. Okay, so when a price makes a higher change in the quantity demanded. So when I change the price, the demand is more. Okay, we say that the price elastic demand, we say that the product has a price elastic demand, and their values of the PED is always above 1. Okay, so when you calculate the PED, it's always above 1. Okay, so this is when I change the price, and this results to a higher change in the quantity demanded. Change in price leads to higher change in quantity. And same would apply when something is inelastic demand. The change in price will make a smaller change in demand in the change in quantity demanded. So you can see this curve right here shows inelasticity. Okay, and this curve right here shows unitary. Okay, when there's a change in the demand, the price is equal, and the change in demand of 10% will also equal to the 10% of change. So when they're equal, we say this is called unitary price elastic demand. So we've talked about elastic price elastic demand, we've talked about inelastic demand, and then now we've talked about unitary price elastic demand. Then we look at two other curves. We have the infinitely price elastic demand. This is when it is perpendicular to the x-axis, we say that it is infinitely price elastic demand, and when we say it is when it is vertical or when it is perpendicular to the y-axis, we say that it is perfect price elastic because it has no effect on the demand. But with the infinitely, when the quantity of demand changes, uh, there will be no any change in the price itself. So when someone demands and I've not done anything to it. So for example, like the fashion products. Okay. Now what affects PED? So what affects PED? Now we're looking at the factors that affect the PED. And the first one is the number of substitutes. Okay, so the number of substitutes. Now if a product has many substitute products, uh, it will have an elastic demand. Okay, so if I have maybe this Coca-Cola and then there's a juice, okay, this is a sort of juice you have, or maybe Pepsi and Mountain Dew. If Pepsi's price increases, I'll go to Mountain Dew, okay, because they're alternate goods, okay, and won't make a difference. That means that if I shift, okay, this will mean that because of the change in price, there will be a great effect in its demand, right? Because if the price rises, then they'll move on to the substitute, okay? So that will mean that it's price elastic demand because the quantity will increase, the quantity demanded will increase for the substitute. We move on to the time period. The time period is simply when demand for a product is more likely to be elastic in the long run. Okay, so for example, if the price rises, consumers will search for a cheaper substitute. Okay, and therefore, the longer they have, the more likely they are to find one. So that's quite self-explanatory. The next one is the proportion of income spent on the commodity. Now, let's give an example here. I have a pencil and I have an expensive laptop. Okay, my income is $100,000 per year. Okay, a laptop, or okay, let's give a pencil and a car. Okay, the car is $50,000. It's taking half of my income. If it is half my income, okay, then what will that result to? That will result to a high elasticity. It will be very elastic because when the price of that will increase, I will not buy it, okay, because it's taking too much proportion of my income. But for example, a pen or rice or water necessities, I wouldn't even know the price increases. For example, a lollipop, you don't even know that the price would increase, okay, because it's not even affecting your income. It's very, very small percentage of the income, of your proportion of the income. Now we have a look at the PED and the revenue. How are they related? How is the price elastic demand and the revenue related? Okay, now producers calculate the PED of their product and take a suitable action to make the product more profitable. So they basically do something so that they want, their product to be more profitable. Now everyone does that, okay? They do something so that, for example, I can do something to my pen, and then wow, everyone is like, oh, damn, it has a laser or something like that. That will increase my profit. But okay, that's not a good example, but um, that's just some of the things. So producers do something, they calculate the PED so that they can do the action. Okay, that's why we calculate PED. Okay, and what is revenue? Revenue is the amount of money that a producer firm generates from the sales. Okay. The total sales um, is how we calculate or how we get the income. Okay, we move on to if the product is found to have an elastic demand. Okay, meaning if the product has an elastic demand, meaning when I change the price, it'll have a great effect on the quantity demanded. The producer can lower the prices to increase the revenue. Because if I reduce the price, what would that mean? It will be more people will buy. Okay, but if I increase the price, less people will buy. Okay, because demand also, there's law of demand comes into this. We have also learned about the law of demand. And if a product is inelastic in demand, what will happen? The producer can raise the prices to increase the revenue. Okay, so when something is inelastic simply means that there's no effect. For example, a pen or rice necessities, I need to get them. So an increase in price will also increase the revenue, right? Because I need them, it's a necessity. Okay, so hopefully you've understood price elastic of demand, price elasticity of demand. It can be a tricky topic if you don't understand, but if you understand in the first go, rewatch that section where I talk about price elasticity of demand. Okay, we move on to price elasticity of supply. Okay, so now we're having a look at the price elasticity of supply, the PES. Okay, and the PES is simply the responsiveness of its quantity supplied. The other one was quantity demanded. This one is quantity supplied to its changes in price. How do you calculate PES? The same sort of formula, changing quantity over changing price. Now, just like PED, PES can be categorized into price elastic supply, price inelastic, perfectly price inelastic, infinitely price elastic, and unitary price elastic. Okay, so it's similar to the other diagrams. It's just exactly the same. So we are not going to be redrawing the diagrams. So you can check previously on how the diagrams look like. So it will be similar. Now we'll have a look at the factors that affect this PES. And the first one is the time of production. Okay, if most products can be made quickly, it's like the factors of supply. If this product can be made quickly, then it should have a price elastic supply because you can supply so quickly that it'll be price elastic. Okay, for example, juice at a restaurant, but products which take longer time to produce, like a car, will have price inelastic supply. You wouldn't want to supply it because it takes a lot of time and you need income as fast as possible. Okay. The next one is availability of resources. If you have more resources, which are including the factors of production, especially land, labor, capital, this will make it to price elastic. Remember, elastic supply is when I change my supply, or when there's a change in price. Let's just take you to that. Basically, let's go to PED and then I'll show you there. So for the elastic, so when there's a change in price, it makes a high change in the supply. Okay, so there's a big change in the supply. So if, like for example, the price reduces, there'll be a increase in the supply. Okay, now we come to another big topic called market economic system. Okay, market economic system. Now, from its name, we've talked about an economy. An economy is basically the exchange of goods and services, if you remember, from a producer and consumer. This is where we come to the market economic system. Okay, it's similar to what we talked about the economy. This time it's the economy system. Okay, we'll look at the types of the economic systems. Okay, so let's read this. In a market economic system or a free market economic system, all the resources are allocated by the market. Okay, so all these resources are allocated by the market. And private producers and consumers, okay, so we're first having a look at the market economic system or free market economic system. Okay, so this is when all the resources are allocated by the market. And this market, I say, meaning the private producers and the consumers. Okay, so that is what I mean. And there is very little government intervention, or maybe no government intervention in the resource allocation. So this is all done by the producers and the consumers. Okay, and there are virtually no economies in the world that follow this system. So it's quite irrelevant to even to learn this, but for economics sake, or to learn why we don't practice this, we need to learn this. Okay, and however, there is something. There's a country called Hong Kong and Singapore that come really close to this. Again, in your free time, you can check the index of economic freedom, but it is not relevant in IGCSE. Okay, so we move on to the features. Okay, in the features, we say all resources are owned and allocated by private individuals. So these resources are goods and services. Okay, if you're wondering, all these raw materials are owned by these private individuals, by these businesses, and the government can do nothing about anything related to the market. They cannot say, pollution, or they cannot give anything taxes. They cannot do anything like that. They cannot provide any public goods. Okay, they have no talk in this. Okay, the government is useless in this. There should be no need of the government in such a topic of economic system. Okay. Next up, we say that what to be produced is solved by producing the most demanded goods, for which people spend a lot. So, this is the flaw. This is the drawback of this type of economic system. These producers will only buy things or goods that will be beneficial. Okay, they'll not produce. Sorry, not buy. Did I say buy? I mean to produce. So these producers will only produce goods that will be beneficial, and that can actually be a big risk, because then they will start to produce demerit goods. And we'll look at what demerit goods are. And right now, let me just tell you, demerit goods are simply goods that have a harmful effect to the society. Okay, it has a harmful effect to the society, like for example, cigarettes. Okay, because so many people are addicted to this, because so many people want this, they're going to be producing a lot of this, and this can actually harm the society. And this society, maybe they don't want education. Okay, so no one is going to produce education. So you can see how the producers just care of getting money, and the consumers are literally careless. There's no form of encouragement. Okay, so hopefully you understand that too. Okay, and now we move on to the advantages. Okay, and also the last one is producers will only produce to people that can pay the price. If you have enough people that can pay the price, okay, go ahead. We're only going to be paying for them then. Okay, so that's how everything works with this type of system. Okay, let's move on to the advantages and then the disadvantages, and then just have a few definitions of the terms, and we are done with this whole. Oh wait, we have 2.2 again. So Well, we're done with this long type of notes there. The advantages. When looking at the advantages, we say a wide variety of quality goods and services are to be produced in different firms that will complete to satisfy the consumer wants and will make profits. Okay, so when there's a wide variety of quality goods and services that will be produced from different firms, because you have a lot of competition and you want to satisfy your custom consumers to only buy with them, the quality of the goods will become much better so that the consumers choose your business over the others because it's quite competitive in this type of system. Next up is that firms will respond quickly to consumer changes. I demand, I want this, and they're gonna quickly make it because all they want is just profit. They just want to get profit, and without any other factor, they're just gonna make the good. Next up, we have the high efficiency that will exist, and since producers want to maximize the profits, they will use resources very efficiently. So meaning that they will produce they will use less resources to make less raw materials to make the product, but so they're gonna basically use it efficiently because they have limited and they know that. So if they want to make more products, they have to use less raw materials, which can be helpful, like they can cut less trees. And because there's no government intervention, it'll be very easy to start a business. You'll have no requirements. You just run the business and you sell the products you want to. Okay. Okay, we move on to the disadvantages, and there are many disadvantages you can see, and that's why we don't practice it in these days. First of all, only profitable goods and services will be produced. Okay, that was the first point. And this means that goods that we don't want, and I've already explained this, but I'm just gonna, explain it for the sake of the disadvantages. Examples would be like the demerit goods I just talked about. And also we have public goods. Public goods are simply, um, I think we'll have a look at that in one of the disadvantages too, or if we're not, I'll just explain it right now. Yeah, I think I'll just explain it because I can't see it in the disadvantage. Okay, I do. So we'll come into that. Okay, we'll come into public goods. Let me not explain it right now. So we'll come into the public goods in just a minute. The next disadvantage, sorry, is the firms will only produce for consumers who can pay for them. So poor people, they don't get any goods, and if there are so many rich people, they're willing to buy, at this price. The producers will be like, okay, we only want money, so we're gonna increase the price because the rich people can pay for it. So the poor people, what about them? They will be left behind, and they cannot buy it. So the poor people will be remain behind. Next up, we have only profitable resources that will be employed. Okay, so again, it's similar to point number one. Uh, Basically, some resources you'll never use them because when you're making that type of good or service, you'll not only need it. Okay, so it's quite important to be like that too. So only the profitable resources will be used, and some of these resources will be left unused. Okay, and in a market economy, capital intensive production is favored over the labor intensive production. So you'd have more machines than labor because it's more cheaper and it's faster. So this can lead to unemployment too. Then we have demerit goods. I've explained this. Demerit goods are simply those goods that have a negative impact to the society, but because they're addictive, people are going to buy them. Okay. Then we have the negative impact on the society. Okay, and this would be externalities. This is what we call externalities. So these are basically the negative impacts on the society, and because they're ignored by the producers, their sole motive is to keep the consumers satisfied and generate a high profit. Okay, and lastly, second last, I mean, is a firm that is able to dominate or control the market is called monopoly. So they're just going to dominate, like Coca-Cola. They're going to be the highest in the soda making. So they're going to over rule the other companies. Then next up, we have due to high competition between the firms, there will be duplication of products. Okay, because maybe there's this product that's very popular, then everyone's just going to make that product. There'll be duplication, there'll be no uniqueness, and there'll be a lot of waste of resources. Finally, let's move on to the three terms. It's not disadvantages, I would say that, but it's just terms you need to know. Okay, public goods. So here's where I come to public goods. So goods that can be used by general public from which they will benefit. Their consumption cannot be measured and thus cannot be charged at any price. And that's where we have a problem of free riders. Okay, so you get to know about that when we look at the market mixed economic system. We'll look at that one, but that's where we look at free rider problem. But public goods is simply given by the government, but in this case, they know the government is not giving anything. Then we have the merit goods. The merit goods are basically the positive effects that is on the community and is to be promoted to consume more for beneficial purposes. And examples would be education, medical care, so on and so forth. And then we have demerit goods that give the positive effects on the society, like cigarettes and alcohol. Okay, we'll look at how the government will control all of that in the mixed economic systems in just a bit. I think that's next. And then we have subsidies, which is simply the financial grants that is given to the firms so that they can lower the cost of production, maybe to promote a good service. Okay, so we're done with this long sort of slide there, but we're going to move on. Okay, so now let's have a look at the next one. We're going to look at the market failure and government intervention. So market failure is quite also popular. So we did look at the public goods and we've looked at the merit goods, so you can check that out. Okay, so these are like moreover the terms that you need to know. Okay, so we've looked at public goods and I've told you we've looked at the merit goods, and now let's have a look at negative externalities. We've also have a look at this. So this is called external costs. So these are basically negative impacts on the society because of producing something. For example, smoke, okay, or pollution, which causes pollution right there. Then we have the external benefits, for example, like a farm. Okay, maybe because of a farm you get good scent, or maybe because of a farm, I don't know, you can get maybe a fresh soil or something like that. Maybe there won't be any insects around there because they fumigate or something like that. But they can also be a negative externalities, because if you live next to a farm, that will mean that there can be more sort of we can say more insects because of the more pests because of that. But at the same time, it depends on the farm. So it can be external costs, external benefits. We call that negative externalities and positive externalities. And then we look at the private costs, which are basically all the costs that the producer and consumer receive when they're producing or consuming respectively. Okay. And for example, the cost of production, when I'm making a certain product, that cost of producing it, okay, is when what we call private costs. And then what we say with private benefits, okay, is simply when there's a benefit of the producer consumer because of production or consumption. And an example would be better immunity when the consumer will get a vaccine. Then we have social costs, and social costs are simply the external costs plus the private costs. So remember, external costs were simply the negative externalities, and when I add them with the private costs, we call them social costs, and the social benefits are basically the external benefits to the private benefits. Now we move on to market failure and the factors affecting market failure. So first of all, we need to define what market failure is. So we're going to start with what is market failure, and then go on to talk about that. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the market failure definition, and then so on and so forth, talking about it more. Okay, so let's begin. What is market failure? Okay, so market failure occurs when the price mechanism fails to allocate resources effectively. And this is a very disadvantageous aspect to the market economy. Okay, and the factors or the causes of market failure are when the social costs exceed the social benefits, when there is an over provision of demerit goods. Okay, this basically means when there's more like cigarettes produced, we call that over provision of demerit goods. When there is an under provision of merit goods, maybe education is not given enough importance, so no one produces it. Okay, that's called under provision of merit goods. This is all because of market failure. Okay, then you can see lack of public goods. So because there's no maybe because you cannot measure how much is consumed, businesses will not get street lights and everything. So therefore, that will lead to lack of public goods. Then we have the immobility of resources, and that basically means when the resources cannot move between the optimal use. Okay, basically, when a resource doesn't have many several uses, and we've talked about this, the economic good, we can say that, for example, workers that only have one particular skill, they'll be immobile, they'll not be needed. So, they're not going to be used. Next one is information failure, and most of these are like relatively direct, so that's why I'm not really emphasizing on that much. So it's quite direct. So information failure, basically when the information between the consumers, producers, and the government are not efficiently and correctly communicated. So basically false information, false advertisements. Okay, so that all leads to information failure. And then finally, we have the abuse of monopoly powers. So monopolistic businesses may use their powers to charge consumers a high price and will only produce what products they want. So it's quite a big disadvantage for them. And what do we mean by monopoly? Monopoly is simply when one supplier supplies the entire market. Okay, so for example, soda, only Coca-Cola will produce. They dominating. That's what we call monopoly. So when one business dominates, monopoly is when a single supplier who supplies the entire market with a particular product and has no competition. Okay, so that's a good example. Now we move on to mixed economic system. So the previous one that we just talked about is called market economic system. And now here we have the mixed economic system. Okay, so now we're having a look at the mixed economic systems. Okay, and the mixed economic systems is simply when the markets and the government intervene. Okay, and this is basically uh, used in most of the countries. Okay, so most of the countries practice this. India, UK, Brazil are just some examples. And this is because overrides all the disadvantages of both the market and planned economy. Okay, so mainly the advantages of a market economic system is the disadvantages of this, um, and the disadvantages of the market economic system is the advantages of this. So it's like vice versa. So let's have a look at the features and then advantages, disadvantages, then have a look at the legislation. Okay, so this is more like explanation on all of this sort of thing. So you can see how many factors we have affecting all of this. Okay, but we're gonna have a look at all of this, uh, in just a bit. So yeah, this is gonna be a long video because we're still in chapter 2. So maybe it's gonna take us about 3 hours, maybe even more. I'm doing all of this in one sitting, so hopefully the video quality doesn't change every time. Maybe the next break will be a bit longer, so you can recover from all this 2 hours of study if you're watching this live. But let's move on to the advantages. Okay, and the government can provide public goods, necessities, and merit goods. So in the disadvantage, that was the disadvantage. In this one, it's the advantage. So the government can provide public goods for the consumers. So the consumers will be benefited. Okay. Then you can say the government will keep the externalities, monopolies, and harmful goods in control. So like alcohol, what they do is they put taxes so that they can control the things about the product. So we're gonna have a look at that also, risks in a bit. So you'll get to know about that in just a while. And then we have a look at the government can provide jobs in the public sector, because now there's a public sector, the government can now produce the jobs. And then finally, the government can also provide financial help um, to collapsing private organizations. Okay, so they can provide, sorry about that, so they can provide about that. Okay, so hopefully you understand that. They can keep job security more secure. Okay, then we move on, and let's have a look at the disadvantages of this. You can see the advantages, the disadvantages. So it's quite like it depends. Okay, and we're now gonna have a look at this. So let's have a look at the disadvantages now, and let's start with the taxes will be imposed. Okay, because I told you each product will be sort of um, it will be in control. That means taxes will be there. That will lead to rising price, and that can be bad. In a way, it can be bad. So therefore, taxes will be imposed to raise the prices and also will reduce the work incentive. Okay, because now because it's so expensive to buy this product, why would you want to work for it or why would you want to buy it? So that's one of the big disadvantages with this. And then next up, we have the laws and regulations, which can increase the production costs. So what this basically means is that the government now is intervening. Okay, that means that there'll be so many laws. Like right now, we have taxes, we have a lot of regulations, that maybe you cannot smoke in this area or sort of such that will increase the production cost. Okay, like maybe you cannot pollute without permission or something like that. You can only pollute this much amount. So with all these laws and regulations, it will increase the production cost. It will increase the production time. That will lead to a lot of reduction in the production in the economy. That will be bad for the economy. So that's where the disadvantage comes. And then we move on to the public sector organizations, which will be sort of inefficient, okay, because there will be low quality goods and services because they don't have a motive, because the government will not allow them to do that. So that is all the disadvantages. But if you've noticed, in this one, there are more advantages compared to the disadvantages. But in the other one, it was more of disadvantages than advantages. So I hope hopefully you understand that. So now we come to the ways to correct the market failure. Okay. So for example, there's market failure, okay, and it happens, okay, success failures. But how can we correct them? So that's where we come into the picture of having a look at legislations and regulations. And what this simply means is that the government can make laws to regulate market activity. And this is an example will be prohibit smoking in the public. Just like I give a similar type of example previously. So that is that. And they use these laws so that they can control the price because other than that, producers can exploit the consumers, which is bad. Okay. So hopefully you've understood that. Now we have something called the maximum price and the minimum price. Okay. So that's also quite important when having a look at it. Okay. So we have something we say the maximum price and we have the minimum price. Okay. So hopefully you understand that. Okay. So what that means is a minimum price is simply when there is like a price floor. Okay. When there's a price floor or like a certain point of price where it is set to control a decreasing tendency of price. Okay, so basically, for example, alcohol. Okay, maybe you can say that you want a certain price, so we want to decrease the tendency of price. Sorry. For example, maybe education. That was the opposite. That's maximum price. So with like minimum price, you want to reduce the price. Okay, so for education you want to reduce the price, so we use something called the minimum price, which is basically a price floor. And what this basically means is that it's a law. Okay, it's the minimum wage law. And what this means is that it's a must to have you know uh, this much, for example, labor. Okay, so this means that um, simply this what it means that if for example if you're labor and you want a certain price to keep it like fixed, because businesses will just give like a sort of low type of price, because of course it's cheaper for them, but then every labor person has its own right, so therefore they will set a minimum price. So it's the same for the maximum price, and you can see here's the diagram for that. So you can have excess supply. This is the diagram. We have the demand curve, the supply curve, we have the equilibrium point, and then the one above is called excess supply. We've talked about this, so hopefully you understand that. Then we have the maximum price, which is the opposite. So there'll be supply shortage. When there's supply shortage, what will that mean? Is that we need to increase the price. So we use something called the maximum price. For example, demerit goods. Okay. So if I want to increase the price, I would use some demerit goods in order to increase the price. So I use something called the price ceiling or the maximum price. Okay, then we move on to the direct provision of merit in public goods. Since there is a little incentive of the price mechanism, and we've talked about price mechanism simply related to allocation of goods and services, okay, depending on the demand and supply. So that's what we call price mechanism. And there will be a little incentive because, for example, like free education, you know, if there is low price, why would someone, do education? But that is why we have governments that provide them. Okay, so governments would provide free education, free healthcare, public parks, and only the way they can do this is by introducing tax, and they do this by nationalizing certain products so that they get a bit of the money so they can use it for you know their own funds to help their own public goods or to help their society. Then we have taxation on products, and imposing a tax on products will lead to negative externalities, and this will discourage the production and consumption. So, but it's very vital, or else there will be overconsumption of demerit goods. So here we have a diagram of taxation. As you can see, we have the demand curve and the shift, right? You can see there'll be a shift from the S. Let me just take my pencil out. There'll be a shift from the S curve right here, the supply curve, to the supply one, and then this will reduce quantity when there's an increase in price of tax. So when there's an increase in a price, there's going to be less quantity. This is sort of also the law of demand. Therefore, will be shift to the left. So you can just say shift to the left. Then we have subsidies. Subsidies are basically financial grants, and the financial grants basically means that you're giving help to the producers so that they can make this certain product more. So this can be good maybe if they want to promote a certain type of product. They can simply say, okay, here's my subsidies. So produce more of this, for example, books for education. They give to a book industry saying that here's some subsidies so that they can lower the production costs. Lowering the production cost will increase the supply, and increasing the supply will basically give positive effects on their society if the product is a merit good. So here we have another sort of type of uh, uh, graph that shows when there's introduction of subsidies, what happens. So as you guys can see, it'll be a shift to the right. So a shift to the right is when the supply increases due to the factors except price. Okay, so hopefully you understand that. And then you can see that the movements along the demand curve or a supply curve is good only, which happens as a result of a direct change in price of a good and a change caused by any other factors like tax and subsidy. Okay, then we move on to tradable permits. And this basically means that firms will have to buy some permits so that they can maybe, for pollution, because if you overpollute, then maybe the business is closed down by the government. Okay, so it's quite sort of direct. Then we have extension of property rights. Maybe you have a certain noise you can do or something like that so that it doesn't harm anyone around the place. That's what we call extension of property rights. That is also done by the government, and so they can extend property rights or right to own the property or make the noise, and this will be effectively privatize the resources. So you can create some peace between the individuals and the producers, so it can show that. Then we have the international cooperation, and international cooperation simply means that among governments or governments that work together on issues that affect the future of the environment. So basically, what this means is that you can see there's market failure that we just saw, and then we looked at how to correct. All of this is to correct, right? So among governments, governments work together in issues so that they can save the environment. Okay, so they all work together to save the environment. They can do a lot like policies, or they can promote maybe if you collect litter, we will pay you, something like that. So that's what they call international cooperation. So they join as an ally and meet together. We have then the political incentives, and this occurs when there is a clash between the political and economies. That's what we call political incentives. So these are now basically some meanings that is important that are very important. So this occurs when there's a clash between the political and economics. Okay, so when there's a clash between the political and economics, okay, for example, even though mining companies have a lot of environmental damage, the government may encourage and promote their activities to garner political and financial support from them. So that's what we call political incentives. Then we have the lack of incentives, and happens in the free market when individuals profit from an incentive to innovate and cut costs. But in the public sector, what happens is that they'll only pay them salaries regardless of their performance, and therefore that will lack in incentive. So what they do is that the government provides certain public or merit goods directly to the people at low costs, and therefore that can give them a good incentive to work harder. Like maybe the government can give them a car or a house or free education, because they have the ability to do that. So just because they want the incentive of the worker to be high. Then we have the time lags and information failure. We've also talked about information failure as one of the market failure. And basically, this is when the government failure because of lack of incentive, because government office and employees don't have incentive to do these services or give accurate information, because it's too much work for them. Okay, for example, if they're doing a lot of offices, employees, and sort of stuff like that. We then have the welfare effects of policies, government policies such as taxation and welfare payments, which distort the market, which basically means policies which will affect the demand and supply. So when I create a policy, it can affect demand and supply like a lot. Okay, so taxes can basically lead to a lot of change in the demand curve, supply curve, all of that sorts of types of stuff. Um, so hopefully you understand that. Uh, then you simply have all of that. For example, high corporate taxes will deter companies from expanding their operations and making more profits, or deter new enterprises from entering the market. So there you go. That is all of that. And we have now completed the entire chapter 2. So let me show you where we have now left. Okay. So now we've finished chapter 1, chapter 2, and now we're moving on to the microeconomic decision maker. So we're going to finally have a look at money in banking. We're going to have a look at households, workers, trade unions, firms and productions, firms' cost, revenue, and objectives, and then finally have a look at the market structure. And that would then, after that, complete the live stream. But again, we might have maybe another hour or two to complete this, and I'm doing this all in one sit, so it's quite hard for me. So hit the like button, and if you've reached this far, well, that's really good. You're really serious. Thank you again for reaching this far. If you have from the start, almost 2 hours. Now we'll have a break, which will be about 10 minutes long. So we're gonna have a 10-minute break, because again, this is gonna be our second break. So we're gonna have a 10-minute break and then continue with money in banking. And money in banking is again a big topic. So we'll have a look at that, as you guys can see. So actually it's a small topic. So but let's see what we're gonna do. Anyway, that is second session, and now I will see you after 10 minutes to do the next session. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, so it just came a bit early. Yeah, maybe I don't know. I was thinking of putting some music here. So I don't know. So should I do that or no? Maybe in another stream I will put music. So if you're watching this, like I don't know. If you're watching this after the video, I don't know. Comment down below, and then you can tell me if I should add some music, or do you just guys just like it like plain? I mean, if you've reached this far, well and good. I mean, yeah. So let's just begin, and let's talk about money. Okay. So what is money? Okay. So basically, money is a medium of exchange of goods and services. So when you talked about, remember when I talk about economy, when I talked about the economy, I said it's basically the exchange of goods and services between the producers and the consumer. And for the producers, they're exchanging their goods, and for the consumers, we're exchanging money. Okay, and this concept was actually taken from the barter system. Okay, and the barter system was basically the exchange of goods. Okay, now I do this service, you give me this service. So it was sort of like that. And then after time, the someone came up with money. Basically, you earn the money, you earn the value, and then you can exchange it for goods and services. So that's how everything works. That's how a barter system works. And we use that money today as a form of currency, notes and coins. And some of the features that the money must have should be durable, uniform, meaning it should have only like a certain type of design. It should not be like easily copied. It should be divisible, meaning tens, fifties, hundreds, so that you can pay in sort of sections. And it should be portable and generally accepted by the community. Okay. So durable, uniform, divisible, portable. Okay. So yeah, hopefully you got that. And these are the characteristics. So not features, more of the characteristics of what we consider as to be good money when producing it. So let's start with the functions of money. Okay, so let's have a look at the functions of what money is, and everything related to money. So first of all, you need to know that money is a medium of exchange. Okay, and I told you that like in the start of economics when we talked about economy. I think that was what chapter 2, the start of chapter 2 where we talked about economy. I talked about the exchange of the medium. Okay, and money is the exchange of the medium, and money has a value. So the second function is that money is a measure of value, and money acts as a unit of account, allowing us to compare the state and the width of different goods and services. Okay, so basically what we say with money is that it's basically a measure of a value. So medium of exchange, measure of a value. Money is a store of value. Basically, it holds values in the long term. And then finally, we say that money means of deferred payment. So deferred payments are basically they are made on purchases on credit. Uh, Basically, you can say that okay, I'll pay you this money later. First, give me a service, and then we'll pay it later. So that's what we call by deferred payment. So medium of exchange, measure of value, store of value, and deferred payment. Keep repeating it. Medium of exchange, measure of value, store of value, deferred payment. Medium of exchange, measure of value, store of value, deferred payment. So if you keep saying it, you also understand. So you need to know these functions. You need to know these characteristics. Let's move on to banking. So in economics, we have a look at both the commercial bank and also the central bank. So we look at the two functions of them, and that's all we do with banking. Okay, so banks are basically financial institutions that act as an intermediary between the borrowers and savers. We look at what borrowers and savers and factors affecting borrowers, factors affecting saving and everything just in a bit. After this, I think we're gonna have a look at that. And basically, it is the money we save at the banks, okay, that is the one that gives us the loan. So when you're actually having a loan, it's actually taking someone's money in a way, because they store that value in the bank, and then the bank has the ability to give it back. Okay, so that's how basically loans work. And the commercial banks are basically banks that have retail branches located in most cities and towns. And then of course the central bank is the main, they govern the commercial banks too. Okay, for example, the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI. Okay, so that's just an example. That would be the central bank. We move on to the functions of commercial bank. Okay, so you need to have an idea of the functions of the commercial bank and at the same time have a function of the central bank. So they have different functions. The first function of a commercial bank is to accept deposits in the forms of savings. Okay, so what that means is that what we say by accept deposits in terms of savings. So, for example, I go to the commercial bank, I deposit this amount of money for savings because why does someone save? It's more secure. So, reasons for saving, it's secure. If you store in the bank, they give you money back. Okay, they give you money back. So, because of keeping it, that's why people save, because if you save, you're giving them the bank money. Okay, but when a bank goes bankrupt, is that's where the central bank comes into the picture. Next up is the aid of customers in making and receiving payments via the bank account. So if I have a credit card, they are the ones in charge. Maybe I want to use my credit card. The commercial banks will send me messages saying that you've made a purchase of this using your credit card. Are you sure? Or yeah, you want to confirm that? So all of that is done by the commercial bank. Then they also give loans. They buy and sell shares on the customer's behalf. They provide insurance. For example, if your money is stolen because of theft, they will give you insurance. But at the same time, you have to pay for the insurance. Then we have they exchange foreign currencies, and then they provide financial planning advice. So they give planning advice. We then move on to the functions of a central bank. Okay, now a central bank will issue notes and coins as a form of a national currency. They make the coins or they issue the coins in sort of way. They manage all payments relating to the government. So whatever the government makes, does, buys, whatever the government deals with, whatever the government does, it manages all the payments. So the central bank does all of that. It manages the national debt. For example, if you've taken a loan from another country, this is a big scale. So central banks do all of this, and then they'll repay. So central banks are like the big deal. The commercial banks are just like for the consumers, but the central bank talks about like billions of money, millions of money. They deal in like big type of thing. So that's what they call the central bank. It's also a lender of the last resort. So for example, if the commercial banks don't have enough money, that is when the central bank comes into the picture. It gives them some help by providing more money from its own. Then also it manages the country's gold, foreign currency, and all of that. Um, Basically adjusts the exchange rate, and then finally operates the monetary policy on the economy, which we will be explained later. So that's all you need to know with money and banking. We move on to households. Okay, households. So it's also not that big of a topic, as you guys can see. So let's start with spending. Okay, so we're going to start with spending. I tell you what spending is, I give you the factors. Okay, saving, I tell you what saving is, I give you the factors. Borrowing, I tell you what borrowing is, I give you the factors. Okay, and that's all we have to do. So just three of them, and we're done with the household. So it's quite simple. So let's start. Spending. What is spending? It comes from its English word, spending. Okay, when someone tells you spend, what does that mean? Simply means that the buying of goods and services is called consumption. So spending would be, you know, uh, same thing. Okay, so when you spend money for consumption purposes, that's what we call um, spending. Okay, so when you buy a good or service for the sake of consumption, we are spending something, and this is called the consumer expenditure. And people consume in order to satisfy their needs and wants, and we've seen this in like the basic economics. We've seen this in like the start. So you all know this, okay? So let's have a look at the factors that affect consumption, and more of these factors are like they're almost similar for all three of them. So we start with number one, disposable income. So disposable income is the same thing as just normal income. What that basically means is that something that relates to just normal income. When I work something, that's my income. So if I have more income, what will that mean? I have the ability to consume more, meaning the ability to pay more. So that therefore I will be having the ability to consume more. So my spending will increase if I have a higher disposable income. The next one is that wealth. If I'm rich, okay, the more wealthy will have big assets, and he will be the person who spends a lot. Then we have consumer confidence. If I'm confident that my job will suffice me, or will produce me enough money so that I can do this, or sort of spend this much, you know, then he will be confident and he will spend more. Finally, then we have interest rates. Interest rates is what I told you like in the start. If I basically, it's provided by the banks because of saving. If you save, if the savings are high, maybe if the interest rates are high, then consumers will save more, and that means they will earn more interest, and therefore their consumer expenditure will fall. So that means they will not have enough to spend, because the bank is going to pay them back later. So they're saving more. Then we move on to saving. Talking about saving, let's have a look at saving. So saving basically talks about um, when the income is not spent, and when people save the money by depositing in the banks and then they withdraw it later. And that is what we call saving. Okay. So what are the factors that affect saving? So saving is more like sort of self-explanatory again, um, as you guys know. So saving, when we're looking at saving, what do we say? The factors that affect saving are: number one, the saving for consumption. Okay, this means that if people save so that they can consume later, they will save money so that they can make bigger purchases in the future, like a house. So they'll start saving right now, maybe for your uni education. Okay, and therefore it also depends on the customer's future plans or the consumer's future plans. So if my future plans is to buy a house in the future, then I will save right now so I can earn that money back. Then again, we have disposable income, just like the previous one for spending. Basically, if the amount of the disposable income is high, if I have a high disposable income, that means that I will save more, and if I can save more, then uh, there will be more savings. So there's a saying also saying the rich will always be richer because they have more money to save. So they'll just keep saving, and then they'll keep investing. So it's a win-win, but the poor will remain poor. So it's a saying like that. Okay, so it applies also in economics. The next one is the interest rates. So interest rates are simply when you put like a money into the bank gives you a certain price back. Okay, because it's helping the bank in their day-to-day running. So if you give your money to the bank, they will have to give something in return. Yeah, why would I save? So that's what we call interest rates. If the interest rates are high, then there'll be more saving, and interest is basically the return on a saving. Okay, so the longer you save an amount, the higher the amount you get, so the higher the interest rates that you receive. Then again, consumer confidence. So you can see most of the factors are just like the one previously. So consumer confidence simply means that if a consumer is not confident about his job security and incomes in the future, then he might not save more. He may save more, sorry. So if he thinks that, okay, my job is not secure, he's going to save more. Finally, we have the availability of saving schemes. Okay, this basically means that a bank can offer a variety of saving schemes, and this basically is used so that they can have more attractive schemes, which will basically benefit consumers. So you can say, if you save this after for 5 years, you will receive this much amount of money, or you will receive a holiday, or something like that. So those are basically saving schemes that are provided to the consumer, and which can attract them to save more. So if they're attracted to save more, then there'll be a higher saving. Let's move on to borrowing. So borrowing is basically just like its word, just like the English name. So it basically just means, uh, it basically means just borrowing from a person. Okay, it's like, okay, in English they tell you don't use the same word to explain, but it's sort of like self-explanatory. Borrowing, to receive from a person or institution. Okay, yeah, that's a good version. So the lender will give the borrower. Okay, and yeah, so that will be that. Okay, then let's have a look at the factors that are affecting borrowing. The first one is interest rates. We've talked about interest rates a lot. Okay, we've talked about it a lot, and basically this means that uh, what this means is that it also allow interest is also the cost of borrowing. When a person takes a loan, he must repay the entire amount. at the end of a fixed period. Okay, so when you borrow, you know, like the way you save, you get interest rates. This time you have to give the interest rates. Okay, so it's like vice versa. If you're taking, then you have to pay the interest rates. But if you're giving, then they will pay you the interest rates. So that's where we come into the interest rates. So if there's a less interest rates than uh, to pay back, then you know people will borrow more. Okay, like in different countries they have different interest rates to pay back. Okay, the next one is wealth slash income. Okay, this one is banks will give you a loan if you're wealthy because they trust you. They know that you're gonna pay the amount back. So they look at wealthy people because if you're wealthy, then you have the ability to pay them back quicker, maybe. Therefore, they will give you a loan as much as you want. So then we have consumer confidence. Consumer confidence basically simply means that if I'm confident about my financial situation, then I will, it'll affect borrowing too. For example, if you think that the prices will rise in the future, maybe, then they will borrow now because it's cheaper. And then they'll make the big purchases before it goes like before COVID hit, you know, if you knew that COVID's gonna become big like this, you would make big purchases so that um, it's gonna help you in the long term or the long run. So that's where borrowing comes. Okay, so that is. Then we have the ways of borrowing. Sorry, I missed that one. The last one is the ways of borrowing, and this basically means that the number of ways to borrow can influence the borrowing. And nowadays, there are many borrowing types of facilities such as overdrafts, bank loans. Okay, so it also depends on the way of borrowing, so you know, sort of that. And then this one just talks about the saying about the richer you are, you know, the more uh, rich you get, and the poorer you are, the poorer you get, you know, something like that. Okay, so we finished households. Now we move on to workers. So, and I think in this live stream we'll just finish sort of trade unions, and then we'll resume after a while. So it's still quite some time left though. Or maybe we do workers as the last one. So I think, what do you guys say? Because it's a very long. You can see how long it is. You can see very long. It's very long. So I think I'm gonna end the stream right here. It's quite fun to do such a long stream. So I covered a lot actually, and hopefully you enjoyed this type of live streams, the long live streams. I'll make a future one where I continue with the labor because you can see I have a lot left, and you know, I can't record everything in one sitting. So I think I'll call it a day. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Quite a long live stream, almost 2 hours 30 minutes, and, but it was very fun to be honest. This was my longest live stream that I've ever done on YouTube, and hopefully you learned something. And if you're watching this as a video, then if you've made it this far, wow, that's amazing. And yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this video. This was very thorough revision, literally details. If you want these notes, when I publish the video, this will be in the description, so you can go check them out yourself. So thank you for watching this live stream, and I'll see you in the next live stream or video. So goodbye